Hi, everyone.
Welcome back to episode 46 of A People's Guide to Publishing. Oh, and I have to throw a shout out to my friend Alex Kuiper, my childhood friend Alex Kuiper, who is turning 44 and asked for a shout out on our 44th episode, but it was too late for that, so he gets it on the 46th episode.
Happy birthday, Alex. You're ahead of your time.
We're just looking forward to when you're 46.
Yeah, it's going to be the best year.
It's coming right up.
Today, can you take out my
Yeah, I always take out your ums, don't worry.
Take out my ums.
That's really my biggest job in editing. Alex was around at the very beginning of Microcosm, so that is appropriate for the fact that he is still in my life. If you're lost and or confused, this is A People's Guide to Publishing, and you are right to be confused and lost, as most of us are here.
I'm Ellie Blue. I'm the editorial and marketing director here at Microcosm Publishing. I got my start as a feminist bicycle book publisher, and then I joined forces with the greatest little independent publisher there is.
That could, somehow.
And still does.
Most days. I am Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm. I am also the autistic publisher and the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, editing the book.
So today we're going to tell you about our winter vacation. We spent a couple of weeks in January on the road. First we went to Baltimore for the Winter Institute, which is the biggest national book-selling conference.
For independent booksellers.
The most charming people on earth.
BEA is probably, which is now called Book Expo, once again, somehow, is still larger, but it's larger in the bad way. It's like boring and
I don't even
it has nothing for us there. You've gone to it.
I don't even acknowledge its existence, though.
I see.
It's hard to remember.
Ellie is intellectually boycotting Book Expo.
Boycotting what?
Book Expo.
What?
Oh, yes. See? And she's doing a very good job.
So from Baltimore, we flew to Las Vegas, Nevada. A little bit of a different climate and different scene.
About 45 degrees warmer.
While we were in Vegas, we went to the one of the bigger gift shows in the country. It's called the Las Vegas Marketplace. And it was a very, very, very different scene, but also a place where maybe just as many books are sold, if not more, than at independent bookstores. So we're going to talk about our experiences and compare and contrast and give you some lessons that we learned and our new view of the industry.
By the numbers, the gift market is much bigger than the trade market, but you will have a very hard time getting many publishers and or booksellers to admit that.
I guess that would be lesson one.
Yeah.
Lesson one. And when you say the gift market, you don't just mean this giant mega mall in Vegas. You mean like the books that are sold to gift shops and gift shops.
So the purpose of the gift market is not like your holiday gift show. The gift market is not open to the public. The gift market is attended by something like 100,000 people.
It was wild.
Across 3 18-story buildings and then 2 additional airplane hangars where the spillover happens and a lot of the honestly more interesting stuff is placed. And it's just full of people. Like, you cannot walk in there.
You can't even get on the elevator. It was really intense. There's also like 2 floors of just Christmas stuff.
Yeah. There's
so much furniture. There's so much stuff that you're just like, where does all this stuff come from? Where does it go? But that's what everybody was there for. The amount of books in that place, like we went and we visited every little book outpost. There weren't very many. There were like 6. And it was tiny compared to the rest of it. And yet.
And so what goes on there is this is where people that own gift shops go to learn about new product lines to put in their stores. And so that is the only function. Like, this is like, I think of fashion having a lot of things like this, where you're learning about the spring line and you're like seeing cutting edge stuff like unveiled for the first time. And, they show you what the color of the year is and things like that. And design is a huge thing in gift, as is packaging, as, almost and often to the detriment of substance. So you really want to not go there with your most idealistic self, was lesson 2.
Yeah, leave your idealistic self in Baltimore.
I did know that, but it was still fairly dispiriting to, have my service dog stepped on, to, have people that, like, really don't care to give you the time of day. And even, when you're, say, a customer. And so it was interesting to see how books fill a role in that world, you know.
It was so eye-opening for me.
How so?
Like, I thought about, like, every time I've ever been in a furniture store, which is honestly not that many times.
Yeah, I was going to say, where do you hang out?
But, like, it made me realize, sort of open my eyes for the first time to the fact that you go to a furniture store and they don't just have furniture. They have, like, throw pillows on the furniture. They have, like, a coffee table with a rug under it and a book on it, like a book of pictures of trees or something. And it's all just kind of like giving atmosphere to the furniture, but it's also for sale, and they get it from somewhere, and where they get it from is probably a Las Vegas gift show or some other gift show like it.
And it's fascinating because when you go to this thing, you know, I think of, well, this will tell you a little bit about me. I think of all beds as virtually interchangeable.
False, false.
And when you go there and, you know, and they've really built out all these showrooms so you can, like, see what the bed would look like in your store and then in, like, the person's bedroom where they would actually have it in the end result, like, several tiers down the road. You know, you don't really ever think about merchandising that way. Even someone like myself who thinks probably more about merchandising than most people. But it was interesting to see the books that I would consider so dreadfully boring and unfit for the gift market having a place in the gift market. You know, that was sort of my big lesson, was that there's still a lot I don't know about who the customers are. And while there are certainly vendors that thrive on any, like, a cutting board with the F word on it, or like a welcome mat with the F word on it, or presumably a journal or a book, you know, who cares what's in it. There are also a lot of people that are really selling a different kind of lifestyle brands. You know, it's really much more about, like, how did you put it? The projected wealth that you want to have?
Yeah, like each showroom was sort of telling an aspirational story of what...
Of wealth.
Of essentially wealth. I mean, even the ones that weren't were. It's just there's so many different kinds of ways to want to be wealthy.
Whereas, like, at Winter Institute, they're telling a aspirational story about, like, your own literary worth and, like, sort of how you view, how knowledge plays a role in your comprehension of the world.
I would say that if Winter Institute was, like, consciously in any way telling any kind of story, it would be very different and possibly a more successful conference.
Interesting.
Like, I don't think there's that level of thinking about marketing in the book industry. Like, I think for people who are into books, the aspiration is the opposite. Like, the aspiration is to not seem like you're marketing, to not seem like you're selling anything, to just seem like, to kind of feel like you're involved in this free exchange of ideas and these leaps of the imagination that you can share with other people, which is its own kind of aspiration, and it is very, like, wealth oriented in a way, but it's also people really dress down.
Yeah.
People really bring their awkwardness fully with them. Like, I felt much more comfortable in that environment, to be honest. But yeah, like, people are much more about, like, kind of making connections with each other and, like, finding something new, and almost sort of like a story of, like, personal discovery.
That's true.
And personal growth.
That's very true. Yeah, I found that a lot of the times the help, like the people that were putting together the catering and, like, setting up and tearing down the tables, like, really wanted to have substantive conversations with me, which if they did at the Las Vegas gift show, they were not allowed to, or at least they did not.
One thing I've noticed about book conferences and book events is that, like, you can totally tell that the staff from the hotel that it's at are, like, totally stoked to be doing that event and, like, way more interested than in most boring old events.
At Winter Institute this year, I learned that the average price of a hardcover is now hitting $30, and there's not, like, shame or apprehension about that. Like, that's just how it is now.
Wow.
That was very confusing. And so then I'm, like, waiting for there to be some that are $31, $32, you know?
It's only a matter of minutes, I suppose.
Yeah.
What else did you learn at Winter Institute?
I learned that publishers, even especially big publishers, still do not know how to market fiction. That really their methods are still trying to pass out galleys and copies to influencers and hoping that something catches buzz because they just haven't figured out a better way.
Heady stuff. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of fiction being published. And it's true. Like, you don't necessarily... Like, I feel like fiction book covers, like, the design standard is the same for... The only other thing I can think of that has, like, a similar design standard is, like, the poster for bands that you see on telephone poles, where, like, it really is just speaking to insiders and people who already know the aesthetic language of that genre, and they're not trying to reach out beyond that.
Yeah.
Like telling you what
it is.
Inside. Yeah.
Like, why you want it, if you want it, if you care.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I learned a lot of, like, facts. Mm-hmm. Like, I learned some cool facts about, like, what it communicates when you put an age range in your metadata. Mm-hmm. If you say 12 plus, it's for, like, it's, like, G-rated, but if you say 15 plus or 16 plus, that means there's sex in that YA novel.
Racy!
Whew!
And, yeah, similarly, most of my lessons were of that caliber, that I understood things like that, and I understood, like, the story that is told by typography, and I understood that most stores are, you know, they really feel like they need to get behind the big names because they feel like that's how they're going to make money. So, but the shocker, the landmine that for me was learning that bookstores want to be marketed to. They want more information. They want publishers to keep in touch. They, at least, you know, the ones that are actively going to a convention in Baltimore in January, actually want to get all of your email updates, which blew my mind because I just figured they would be so inundated and over that. I talked a lot in the People's Guide to Publishing book about how the independents now own a larger part of the market share than the big five houses do in terms of total books sold in a year. But there is another interesting factoid that I learned at Winter Institute, is that there are an increasing number of independent publisher titles hitting the New York Times bestseller list, like Braiding Sweetgrass, independent published Milkweed
Published
editions.
in 2013.
Old book, too.
But now on the New York Times bestseller list.
Pleasure Activism.
So good.
Totally independent, a smaller company than we are. That's wild. Congratulations. Go team.
Makes it feel like it's in reach for the first time.
And, you know, this thing used to be controlled by these big houses, you know, and so it's just really neat that, you know, the little people get their say.
One of the things I learned is that booksellers are really passionate about books, and they really are always looking to find, like, the next amazing thing they can hand sell that no one else has heard of. But I learned that despite that, their bread and butter is still, like, the same 5 authors.
Yeah.
Like, from the 80s, like we talked about in the last episode, like people who built up their following back when there was less competition, and now they're household names. And if you're an independent bookseller, you kind of have to sell those books, even if you're like, who cares?
And even, like, we have a bookstore, and it's the most specialized bookstore that you've probably ever seen. And yet people do come in and they ask for big name authors, they ask for murder mysteries, they ask for Bibles, they ask for religious self-help books. You know, they can't comprehend that we're a specialized bookstore. So I can only imagine if you are a general interest bookstore, you know, of course people come in every day looking for things like John Grisham or Danielle Steele or, you know, names, you know, brand names.
And yeah, like, that is one of the less exciting things that it left me with, was this kind of feeling of like, oh, how does anyone break in?
Right.
There's a book actually that I was really excited to find, Vivek Shreya's book, The Subtweet. It's a novel that she wrote about women of color in Toronto who are musicians and they're friends. It's like a friendship novel. And I think she wanted to write a book with, like, no cis guys, no white people. It's totally brilliant. And, you know, she is, like, somebody who's built up her name through music and through art and through writing over the years. And, like, I really hope that she has her moment of breaking into the mainstream with this book, because it's like, if anyone's going to break in, it should be her. So I'm giving it a plug on this podcast because, y'all, we don't carry a lot of novels, but this book is so good. It's also, like, the smartest book that I've read in years.
The other thing we learned is that if you go from Portland, Oregon to Baltimore on the Amtrak during like one of the worst winter storms. You will both get sick, you will miss your connections, and then you will find out that hundreds of flights were delayed and that you were lucky to make it at all. That was And we are now both getting over, somewhat, from being sick.
This has been the People's Guide to Publishing podcast.
We are the people. I am your host, Joe Beal, the autistic publisher, and the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, the book.
I'm Ellie Blue, and I'm going to stop talking now so I can go cough.
Till next week.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub.
On Twitter at Microcosm.
On Facebook at Microcosm Publishing.
On Instagram at Microcosm_pub.
And here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.